Now, something else that is also very important is the ability to provide security, and this is where we get into secure socket layers, good old SSL. As you know, with SSL, we're going to be using port 443. We're going to use digital certificates, and this is going to set up an encrypted session with whomever we're communicating with. And as I've pointed out many times before, you want to make sure that when you're doing these types of sessions that you're using a public issued certificate, somebody from a trusted environment like VeriSign or Thought or GoDaddy, so that if you're trying to sell something to somebody, they're not going to have a big pop-up that says, oh, it's an untrusted certificate. Or even worse, with the default settings of Internet Explorer, you may run into where it just won't show the website. And unless they can scale that back, it's not going to work. So if you're going to be doing anything with the public, get a trusted third-party certificate. Otherwise, you can use group policy to drop it down in there. So how do I go in and set up my certificates? Well, let's go back out to my machine. And what we're going to do is we're going to get into our IIS, and we're going to select our particular server. And you'll notice that we have the ability to go in and drop down into our site. And let's say that this is our website here. We can go in and we can select bindings. And inside of our bindings, we have HTTPS. If I hit edit, notice that I'm able to select the SSL certificate. This SSL certificate can be, different ones if I wanted to. And let's say that I went and I purchased one from GoDaddy. Well, then what I need to do is I need to make sure that I can do the request for that certificate. They talk about this over on page 203. One of the most important things is when you're requesting a brand new certificate, you have to go in and you have to put in what's called the common name. And by the way, this is exam worthy as well. What the common name is it's the host name of the particular server. One of the real basics that these browsers will do to verify the validity of a server is, does the host name match the common name? Now, I understand that's not necessarily the most secure thing, because how hard is it to change a host name? But it is sort of the first step for when you request a certificate. Make sure that the common name that you fill out is going to match your particular host name. So you need to make sure that that's set up in there. So let's go in and check this out. I'm going to close this off. We'll go in and we'll select our server. And what we want to do is we want to go through and we want to look at the certificates on my particular machine. You want to make sure that all the pieces are in there and that we're going to be able to go in and grab the right certificate. Now, we would go into server certificates, and inside of server certificates, these are the list of certificates that we already have on our particular system. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a certificate request, and here's that all-important common name. And if you don't know what your host name is, what you could do is you can open up the command prompt and simply type host name, and it'll tell you SLC PDC 01. So I'll say SLC PDC 01, and then I would fill out all the rest of this stuff, your organization, your common organizational unit. I'm just going to put some junk in here. And we're going to be in, we'll say CA, US. And then it's going to say, well, what type of cryptographic service provider? This is not the cryptographic service provider for your digital certificate. This is the cryptographic service provider that's going to encrypt your request that you're going to send to whomever you send this off to. So if you're sending off to VeriSign or Thought, they're going to be able to decrypt that, and here's the bit link. But this is not the actual cryptographic provider for the certificate itself. Then you'll give it a file name. For example, I could say // my cert request, and I'll say finish. And what this will do is it will make a file that I would give to VeriSign or Thought or GoDaddy or whoever, and then I would actually go in and get that certificate issued to me. So it's not the actual certificate, it is the request for the certificate. Then what I would do is I would go in once I get the certificate and I would import the certificate, and they would send me a file. It's a PFX file, and typically there's going to be a password for me to import this particular certificate. When you request a certificate, you can have different file sizes, different bit lengths, but realize the longer the bit length, yes, the more secure it is, but it's also going to take a lot more processing power to go through and encrypt that particular tunnel. And I mean, you're not storing the nuclear secrets here, so if anything more than about 1024 is kind of overkill. You can also get what's called an SSL Accelerator card. What an SSL Accelerator card does is it allows you to go through and have secure socket layers, but you are not going to have the processor do the SSL for you. Instead, what happens is the network adapter inside of your card has the SSL, or inside of your computer has the SSL certificate built into it, so it does all the encryption and decryption for you, which works out really well. An SSL Accelerator card would be a pretty decent thing to have. So how do we enable SSL on our particular website? Well, I've already shown you. We would go into our bindings, and after we've imported the certificate, we would go into HTTPS, and we would just select whichever certificate we happen to have imported. So you just want to make sure that you have that set up in there. And if you need to move certificates from one server to another, remember the common name requirement that you have to have in there. What you can do is you can just export a certificate, and then you can go ahead and re-import a certificate if you would like. And they talk about that on page 206, 207. You push a button for export, you push a button for import, and away it goes. Also, when you have your website, you have this button here called SSL Settings. What SSL Settings does is allows you to require SSL. Now, of course, if they come in on port 443, it's going to be SSL. But we also had port 80, so we may want to remove the binding for port 80 and just go up in here and say, hey, we're going to require that we're using secure socket layers. Now, you'll also notice that we have this client certificate. This client certificate is if we want to authenticate based upon a X.509 certificate that is installed on a client. So we can have a machine-based certificate or a user-based certificate, and we would use that for authentication for them to come in. And we can say, ignore it, accept it, or actually require it.